Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my top 10 books of 2024 with a few honorable mentions. I've been seeing these videos go around quite a bit in the last couple of weeks, and I wanted to get all my stats for the year, make sure I was done reading for the year before I went through and picked my top 10 books. I honestly gave a lot of books 5 stars this year. I've been trying to be less stingy with my 5 stars. And then I had a couple that I would have called 6 stars hands down, which are on our list. These are in order, top 10. I did figure out an order because there were a few that I was like, oh no, these need to be like down at the top 3. I just put all 10 in order, and then I'm going to start with my honorable mentions and explain a little bit about them, and then I'm going to get straight into my top 10 of 2024. 2024 was a great reading year for me. Not as great as 2023, but I also started school this year, and being able to do school and still get 50 books read is pretty good for me. When I was in med school, that's when I started my reading journey back up, and I got really into it. Whenever I had free time in med school, I would read. And then that was 2023 though. 2024, I started a master's program, and I'm working full time, and I just don't have as much free time. So the fact that I got 50 books read is pretty good. I also had, I think, 10 5-star reads. I had 15,830 pages read, and overall, great year. I had a good time. I had nothing below a 3-star this year, which was pretty shocking. Normally I'm pretty good at giving 1 or 2 stars. So the fact that there's nothing below a 3-star, I'm happy with that. It means I'm learning my reading taste, right? Anyway, to start, I'm going to go through my 4 honorable mentions, and then I will get right back into my pile over here. So my honorable mentions, The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I love the 5th season. I loved that book so much. I listened to the audiobook a couple years ago, and I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. City We Became is a lot different from the 5th season. However, I thought the power system and magic system in this book was really cool. So in this world, there are avatars that control the cities, and they are the cities. They can draw from the energy of the city to do specific tasks, to move things, to basically protect and build up the city. So the 5 avatars of New York meet each other and try to team up to save the overarching avatar of New York, and it's just like a really cool way to spin a magic system, because it does take more than one person, and it does take all of them together to become one and to be able to fight the forces of evil in the city. So I thought this was a really cool topic and concept, and I'm excited to read the second book. I have it on my shelf, I just haven't gotten to it yet. So that is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. Next is The Drawing of Three by Stephen King. I started my Dark Tower series back in 2023 with The Gunslinger, and I just kept putting off the second book and the rest of the series because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to read the rest of the series. So I picked up Drawing of Three this year because I wanted to continue the series. I just wasn't sure. I was like, I'm going to give it one more book and see if it's good, and my library had it available immediately one day, so I picked it up. I listened to the audiobook at work, and I fell in love. That started my Dark Tower series read. Loved this book. I thought the concept was so cool. I think this whole series, every single book is different. Like, yeah, you're following the same overarching story, but it's so good. The Drawing of Three really gets our characters together for the first time, and I think the cast of characters in this series is super intriguing, and they are all so different. So good seeing everybody come together and meeting everybody, and it really jump-started my Dark Tower series. The next one is The Frugal Wizard's Handbook for Surviving Medieval England by Brandon Sanderson. This one is one by him that a lot of people, it's one of their lesser loved Brandon Sanderson books, and I can see why. It's definitely very different from the other stuff he does. It's very silly and goofy and just a happy, fun time. I think I read this book in 3 days with my friend sitting on the couch, and she was reading Tress and I was reading this. And it was so fun because Tress is one of my all-time favorite books, not just of this year, but all time. So that is why this is an honorable mention, because I read them in the same year. I loved both, but this I loved, Tress is like, you'll see, like one of my best books of the year. This was good, but couldn't compare. So that's why this is an honorable mention rather than on my top 10. I gave this like a 4.75 star. Like, I loved this book. I just can't, I keep comparing it in my head to other Brandon Sandersons that I've read. So that is this book. And my last honorable mention is Wanna Play a Game by Alina May. I love Alina May. She's one of my favorite authors. She writes very dark romance. If you don't like that type of thing, like, check trigger warnings. Like, if you don't like trigger warnings, don't read any of her books. But full of it, so good. I don't really want to say a lot of this about it, but it's very fun. I thought how she wrote all of the characters, they're all very different from one another, and they all come together and really form a little family, and it's so good. I loved this book. It's the first book of her Hunters Club series, and they're all interconnected standalones, but this one definitely deserves to be talked about. And now we're going to get into my top 10. So my number 10 book of the year is Blood of Elves by Andrzej Sapkowski, and I thought this book was so fun. It has a little found family trope where all of them are coming together for the same cause, and they all have like history together, but their history isn't as great as it could be, and there's a lot of fighting and magic, and it's just really cool. I love this book so much. I think it is so fun. This whole series is really good. This in itself is like a 4.5 star read. I thought it was super cool. I read it I listened to it at work over a couple of days span. It got me back into reading this year. I did not read at all in September, October, November. And then when I listened to this first week of December and absolutely loved it. So it jump-started my reading back into place. So this is definitely on my top books of the year. I love it. 4.5 star. Moving on. My number 9 book is actually The Wastelands by Stephen King, Dark Tower number 3. I loved it. I started it I started this book in August and read half of it, literally in 2 days, read half the book. And then I got to part 2 and put a bookmark in and didn't have time to come back to it. So I picked it back up in December, finished listening to it on audio, because the audiobooks, Frank Muller is one of the best audiobook narrators I've found. He keeps my attention. He has different voices for every character. Like, you know exactly who's talking no matter what. I think he's amazing, and kudos to him for getting me to listen to audiobooks, especially like 36 hours of audiobooks in 4 days. He's amazing. I love him. But this book really picks up on the characters' adventures in Midworld, where the gunslinger is from, and it really brings in a new fun character, a little kid, and normally I'm not huge kids in books. He's amazing. Jake is so fun. I love Jake. He is not your normal stereotypical fantasy world kid. He is goofy and witty and very smart. He's really good. I love it. But it introduces Jake, and then the ending as a cliffhanger, and I didn't know that, and I don't know how people who are reading these real time got through it, because this came out 6 years before book 4, and it ends on a cliffhanger, and I was gonna try to wait for book 4 until 2025 started, because it's 900 pages, and I didn't think I'd get done with it if I started it in December and listened to it or read it into January. I did not think I'd get done with it before January 1st. Newsflash, I did. Fantastic. 5 stars. This was a 5-star read. If you've never read any Stephen King books, his character development and character writing is supreme. He has written some of my favorite characters I have ever read in my entire life, and this series does not disappoint. This series is the same. He has some of my favorite characters in this series. So this is why that is on my top 10 list. Number 9, The Wastelands. Could be higher, but honestly, I think some of the other books on here are definitely worth being higher. Next, my number 8 book, I actually don't have with me. I think it's in my car or my friend from work has it. It is Does It Hurt by H.D. Carlton, another dark romance. I read my most read genre this year was dark romance, which I'm surprised because I did not read as many as I did last year in 2023. So my next one on here is Does It Hurt? It is a dark romance, psychological thriller. It's about a girl and a guy who get shipwrecked on an island where the caretaker of this island and this old lighthouse is crazy. And it's just their love developing for each other, as well as starting to learn about each other and starting to understand why both of them have their, like, what their problems are and, like, getting through it together. And it's them trying to get off of this island and get back to the mainland and continue on with their lives. It's so fun. It also has a lot of content warnings that you should probably look into before you read it. There's a lot of dark themes. However, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun. It's got sharks in it. It's got, it's off the coast of Australia. So it's like, it's great. I loved it. Definitely deserves a place on my top 10 for the year. Number 7 is Before the Coffee Gets Cold. I read this in, I think, October or November, and I immediately bought the second book. I thought this was so adorable, and it made me feel. And I think that's something that I miss in books, is when I start to feel things for the characters and for the overarching story. If you don't know what this is about, it's a coffee shop in Japan, and if you sit in one specific seat, you can go back in time or to the future to talk to somebody as long as they themselves have been at the coffee shop. I think it was so creative. It's a translated fiction from a Japanese writer, and I thought it was amazing. It was heart-wrenching. I cried, I laughed, I fell in love with the characters, even if they are a little bit unlikable. Definitely a 5-star read. You should go read it if you haven't, and I'm excited to continue with the series in January. The next book is something that I haven't really heard people talk about on YouTube, and that is Rabbits by Terry Miles. A lot of people rate this around like a 3.5 star. I thought it was a 5-star read. I thought it was fun. It's definitely not for everybody. If you liked Ready Player One, you might enjoy this also. It has a lot of the same feelings and vibes as Ready Player One. So Rabbits is a game that is played all over the world. And you hear a phrase, the door is open, and that means the game is starting. It looks for synchronicities in the world, and it's a lot of mind games and trying to figure out clues, and I thought it was so fun. I loved this book so much. I thought it was very different from everything that I'd ever read before. It's a science fiction, it's got a lot of science fiction elements to it, and it has a lot of plot twists, and it's really fun. It's just a fun book. I don't know how else to explain it other than fun. But I thought the cover was really cool. That's why I picked it up. And then I read what it was about, and I'm like, oh, that sounds so interesting. So I also listened to this one on audio. But if you like fun clue games that are set in our world, possibly altering reality a little bit, Rabbits is really fun. It's a really good time. And I really do recommend this one to people who want a little bit of a different science fiction than, outer space, terraforming planet type of science fiction. Really fun time. My number 5 is actually related to another one of my honorable mentions. I don't have a finished copy of this book, but it is Ready or Not by Alina May. This is the second book in her Hunters Club series, and I have the ARC copy here. She sent it to me. She's such a sweetheart. But this is about the main character's coworker in the first book, and this has it's very dark, very fun. It's set around Halloween. It's got really spooky vibes. I loved this book. Thought it was super great. I related to the main character a little bit more than I'd care to admit, and it was overall just a really fun time. I gave this a 5 stars. Definitely not for everybody, but if you're into this type of book, it's a great read. 4, 3, 2, and 1 are some of my all-time favorite books now. So these books are books that I had heard of on YouTube for the most part. And it made me want to pick them up, and I did, and I fell in love. These are some of my favorite books. These are books that I recommend to almost everybody that I meet. So number 4 is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This book broke me in so many different ways. I thought this was gorgeous. The prose is amazing. The characters are absolutely fantastic. Julie Berry does a great job at mixing the fantasy and the historical fiction and the romance, and she just takes all of those genres and makes a beautiful book out of it. So this book is a historical fiction love story sprinkled with a little bit of fantasy, because the story is a love story set in World War I, and it is told from the perspective of Aphrodite, and how she goes about creating this love between these two people. And I highlighted and picked quotes, and what's fun about it is there's other Greek gods that come in and tell their sides of the story and their parts where they were more present. So like Ares is the god of war. He comes in and starts talking a little bit about the front line of World War I. And then Hades comes in and starts talking about all the death that's been happening around these characters and how it's affecting them, and how some of their other friends are not making it. It's just so, so good. It is very layered and just absolutely gorgeous. If you need a good feel, like makes you feel something book, Lovely War is so good. I recommend this to literally everybody. I think in the last 2 days alone, I've given like 4 or 5 recommendations for this book on Facebook, seeing my friends post what they read this past year. I'm like, you need to read Lovely War in 2025. Like, go read it. I originally heard of this book through Ashlyn Kaylee on YouTube, and she's one of my favorite booktubers, her and her husband, and they both read it, both loved it, and I'm like, I need to read that. That's something I would read. So Lovely War is definitely a 5-star, verging on a 6-star read for me. I cried, I laughed, I fell in love with everybody, and I definitely recommend it for anybody who likes that type of book. My next book is Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. This is another one I read in December. I did finish it in December. I read this in 3 days. This is a 900-page book, and I read it in 3 days. I am very blessed to be able to listen to audiobooks at work and get books read that way. This is a 28-hour audiobook that I finished in 3 shifts, and I'm not mad about it. So this book is actually a study of Roland, the main character, his past. So it's just really good times. It really made me want to continue this series and finish it pretty much immediately. So I am continuing this series currently. I'm on the next book, and I cannot wait to get the rest of the books read. It is so good. I 100% recommend this series. This is going to be like a 10-star series for me. Like, forget the 5-star rating. This is easily like a high 6, 7-star series. Like, not every book is a 5-star. The series and the complexities of the series easily make it 6-star series. So that is my number 3. And then my last 2 books in this are some of my favorites ever. Like, you cannot tell me that these books are not 5, 6-star books, because I will fight tooth and nail against you and say that they are 5-star books. Number 2 is Shark Heart, a love story by Emily Hebeck. And oh my God, when I tell you I sobbed, my friend looked at me, she's like, are you okay? Because I was like 100 pages in, 160 pages in, I was sobbing. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just feeling it. It is such a good time. It is heartbreaking. This book is everything I wanted from it and more. And I got it from the library. I read this from the library, and ended up buying a copy like 3 days later because I'm like, I can't go without it. This was a one-day read because this book is told with like half the pages are very open. It's like a few sentences per chapter. There's little notes and diary entries, and just, it was beautiful. This book is a little bit out there for a lot of different people. It is based on Hindu myth, I'm pretty sure. But it's about marriage and motherhood and going through changes and the ability to love somebody through it all. And I think that is the biggest part, is like the knowing that you are going to continue loving somebody no matter what happens. And I think that is the biggest aspect of this book, because it's about a man and a wife who had just gotten married, and they're starting to plan their lives and move through marriage in their first year of marriage. And he gets the diagnosis of metamorphosis, pretty much, that he is changing into a great white shark. And it is their story, first and foremost, about how one deals with change and how no matter what happens to your partner, you're going to love them, even if they are changing into a great white shark. It is just such a beautiful story, and I 100% recommend this. Like, I told my grandma to read it, and she liked it, and she's very, like, straight-laced when it comes to books, so she even liked it, and I was very happy about that. I told my friends, all of my friends have read it, they all loved it. Like, this book is where it's at. It is so good. I loved it, and it's a very different genre for me. It's more of like a literary science fiction, which I'm not usually a literary fiction girly, but this one broke my heart. Read it. Read this book. It is so freaking good. Okay. And I don't have my number one book of the year. I have it loaned out to one of my friends, which kind of sucks because I love this book. It is full of sticky notes and annotations and underlines, and I want to go back and reread it and do some more. But that book is Tress of the Emerald Sea. 6-star book, easily read. I think I read it in like 2 days. Like, it was so good. I couldn't put it down. It has some of the best characters, one of the best magic systems I've ever read in a book, and I thought the story was amazing. Ultimately, it is a take on The Princess Bride. The Tress of the Emerald Sea is the same vibe, where somebody's going to go save somebody, but it's not necessarily about actually saving that person. It's about the loved ones that you make on the way, and your family, your found family, and all of that. Tress is a girl from this really remote island, and the love of her life is basically sold off by his dad to the witch of the world, and she wants him back. So she decides to go on an adventure. She's never left her island. She goes on this adventure, and it's so much more. It is so much more than a love story. It is about finding people where you belong, and it's about finding new friends and finding out more about yourself and who you are as a person than it is about the love story. It's so good. I loved this book. 6 stars, easy read. But if you need a very easygoing entrance level fantasy book, that book is it. It has got some of the most beautiful prose, and the main character, like the characters in this book, are hilarious, because you got your little sweet girl, and then you got all of this cast and crew of just misfits, pretty much. Got a cannon master that can't shoot a cannon. You've got a guy who can't speak, so he has this little whiteboard that he writes on. There's a Hoyd. I don't know how to describe Hoyd. He's very out there, but I love him so much. He is one of my favorite characters. And then you have a little talking rat companion. Like, who could ask for more than a little talking rat companion? But yes, Tress of the Emerald Sea, best book of the year, hands down, easiest one to put on this list. And that is it. And that is my top 10 of 2024. I'm so pumped to get into 2025 and start reading some of my new favorite books again. I do expect this year to be more of a reading year for me, just because I am figuring out my work life school balance, and I'm hoping to have more time this year to continue reading more. I have a lot of cool things planned for 2025. I have a lot of cool goals for 2025, and that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so much for watching. I am so happy to have a little community here to talk about books. I love talking about books. I love watching people talk about books, and I just love books in general. So, welcome to 2025. I'm excited to be here. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the world. Goodbye.